When we first saw the poster for Common Side Effects, we saw the weird art style and thought, yeah, this must be another goofy, absurdist comedy like Smiling Friends. And we were pretty far off the mark. But what we did get was one of the most surprisingly masterful cartoon drama comedies in years. So with its first season over and a second one on the way, let's rank all the characters from good to evil. And as usual, we'll start with our most pure-hearted character and work our way down to the most evil. These characters are the good, and there were actually quite a few candidates for the gold medal of good. But we decided that the man most deserving of it is the main hero himself, Marshall Kuzo. Marshall's one of those rare characters who's honestly a bit too good for his own good.
Call him an angel if you want.
I mean, his whole identity so far revolves around his determination to protect a drug that can cure basically any disease, risking his neck to make sure it lives on and that he can get it to the people who made it. And when I say risking his neck, I mean risking his neck. This dude can't go 2 episodes without almost dying. Hell, he does die in 1 episode. But still, he never gives up on doing the right thing, no matter how many times he's hurt or betrayed by others. It goes without saying that along with people, Marshall is also kind to nature. He's a great dad to his pet tortoise, Socrates, and in one scene he picks up a bug that's struggling to get up off his back. No creature is too small for this guy's good nature, which easily earns him the gold medal of good. And taking a close second place with the silver medal is Agent Capano. While they couldn't have more different goals, this DEA agent has just as kind of a heart as Marshall. He's loyal and supportive to his friend, but he's even more loyal to his pursuit of the truth. Even though they were technically adversaries, he showed goodwill to both Francis and Marshall, returning Socrates to the former and saving the latter's life after Hildy tried to kill him. Going one step further, he warned him about the upcoming FBI raid so he could escape and save more lives, earning him plenty of hero points. The only reason he's a little lower than Marshall is that he was willing to deceive Rusty into thinking he and Agent Harrington were with StarTel Light TV services so they could spy on Marshall from his roof. That's dishonest, sure, but pretty harmless in the grand scheme of things. This guy is still a ray of sunshine in a show that's pretty grim. And for our bronze medal of good, while he isn't the most complex character, Socrates has such a pivotal role in the plot that it would be a crime not to mention him. Without his fertilizer, the Blue Angel mushroom wouldn't be able to grow. I mean, sure, it's unlikely that Socrates is deliberately taking dumps to try and save the human race from capitalist greed, but, he could be. The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. But let's finish out the dynamic duo with Agent Harrington. Like Capano, Harrington is a generally nice person. She cares about her partner, even going out of her way to cheer him up with a surprise visit after the two were separated. She also stopped her new partner from murdering a drug dealer at a rave, which earned her some heroic points too. Unfortunately, in the last couple episodes of the season, she also lost some points, and then gained them right back. Let me explain. She did sorta throw Capano under the bus by saying he wasn't involved with discovering that Marshall was alive. While she was worried about both her career and his mental health, that was pretty low, but not too low, because it could have admittedly been in an effort to protect him. She made up for it by sneaking him some Blue Angel to speed up his recovery at the end of the season, which more than redeemed her as a friend in our eyes. Because, let's be honest, if Capano died, no amount of magic mushrooms would have healed that pain. Next is Francis's mother, Sonia. Sonia was another one of the more wholesome characters in the show. After the Blue Angel healed her dementia, she became her old, energetic self again. She always offered a listening ear to her daughter and even encouraged her to get the mushroom out to help more people. Her death about halfway through the season was an absolute blindside and the first sign that the mushroom might not be all good. But for the time we knew her, she was genuinely pleasant. On a more surprising note, we can say the same for Francis's now ex-boyfriend, Nick. If you went off the first episode alone, you'd probably figure that Nick is the typical lazy, thoughtless boyfriend who justifies Francis going for the other main protagonist. In contrast, he's actually really sincere and nice. A bit clueless, sure, but it was always clear that he loved Francis, and always tried to connect with her in a meaningful way. Of course, this yielded varying degrees of success. For every thoughtful attempt to book a hotel complete with a bathtub for the weekend, there's another thoughtless attempt to propose after she's made it more or less obvious she's not ready. Even with that taken into account, he's a nice guy and definitely deserved better, but we'll save that discussion for later. For now, let's talk about one of Francis's co-workers, Kiki. Another absolute delight. There are way more wholesome characters than you would expect in this show. She comes across as a thoughtful friend, always encouraging Francis in good and bad times alike. She's the type of girl who just does her job in as positive a way as possible, and genuinely relishes the fact that Rehudikal's medicines have saved some lives despite all their misdeeds. That said, she can be a little tone deaf at times, but it never goes beyond her saying something insensitive, and immediately apologizing for it. In any case, she's the kind of friend who would hook you up with pain meds if you needed it. Make of that what you will. And rounding out the good section is Amelia Mushrooms. Was that her real name? In any case, she's a bit of a surprise to see so high, since her actions are sometimes underhanded. She used her connection with Hildy to help her get closer to Marshall, essentially tricking him into working for one of the most unstable people who knew about the mushroom in the first place. That said, she has a genuinely good reason for all this: caring for her sick son. She's a loving mom who's using whatever means necessary to help her son, and while she's not the most honest, she has a noble goal we can't help but sympathize with. And with that said, it's time to move into the more morally questionable characters. This is the gray area, and we start out with the show's other deuteragonist, Frances Applewhite. Like Amelia, Frances is a mix of overall good intentions and some pretty dishonest means. She does seem to sincerely want to help people, to the point where her friendship with Marshall makes her start to question her association with Rehudical. She also takes good care of her mother and clearly has a lot on her hands with babysitting Rick and visiting her on a regular basis. But the thing about Frances is that her good deeds usually have a bit of a shadier side to them. For instance, while she did want to get the mushroom to more people in order to help them, she only discovered the mushroom by lying by omission to Marshall about her line of work. And that's not even mentioning the absolute disaster that was her treatment of Nick. She didn't just blatantly cheat on him, she proceeded to dump him without ever coming clean about it.
This isn't gonna work.
Even in the end, when she makes the decision to help Marshall grow the mushroom, without Rehudikal's involvement, she just quit after ghosting her boss for months, and basically stole his car. Conviction or not, that's honestly a pretty cruddy way to handle the situation, especially considering that Rick was an overall decent guy. While Frances isn't the bad person by any means, she's the definition of a hero with gray morals. And following Frances is her former boss, Rick Kruger, the CEO of Rehudical, who's known for selling antibiotics and antibiotic accessories. Viscerally familiar voice aside, he's almost too incompetent to be evil.
If I'm going down, you're going down.
He had Frances do practically everything for him at first, even calling her to ask for help finding an internet adapter that was in his bag. His complacency earns him the Sloth Sinner medal, but he's not without a surprisingly high amount of good attributes. For one thing, despite how often he makes her do petty jobs, he genuinely cares for Frances. He attended her mother's funeral and gave her a hug, and even started a foundation in her honor that Rehudical would donate to. Plus, while he wants to make money, he also genuinely wants to help people, which is more than we can say for a lot of CEOs out there. It's a bit questionable that he's trying to sell Blue Angel and sprayed cheese for him, but honestly that might just be incompetence rather than sheer malice. Next, we have the famous Colorado car crash angel man, John Taylor. More of a plot device than an actual character. After Marshall just narrowly saves his life after a near-fatal car crash, he basically becomes an unofficial acolyte for Marshall. Not much is known about him, save for the fact that he's another example of the potentially dangerous side effects of the Blue Angel, essentially going insane due to the hallucinations that followed.
I can't tell what's real. Is this real? Are you real?
We feel bad for the guy, and he definitely needs help, but attempted murder is definitely a no-no. A few more minor characters up next. Thaddeus and Linda are Hildy's students, but they're nowhere near as unhinged as she is. In fact, we don't really see much of these two at all. They basically act as Hildy's goons for the most part, and as foils to how genuinely dangerous she is. On a kinda similar note, next up is Kenji, Capano and Harrington's boss. This guy's even more of a nothing burger character, but we mention him for the fact that he's a pretty good example of the guys who are subservient to the bigger bads of the series. He doesn't hesitate to do whatever Big Pharma pressures him to do, and while that hasn't extended to anything outright heinous yet, it did result in the split of Capano and Harrington's iconic duo, which is a surefire ticket to a lower spot. Now, if you thought Rick made Hank Hill's voice impossible to unhear, get a load of Jimmy Jarvis.
Yeah, well, we got plenty of time to get to know each other.
With a name like Jimmy Jarvis, you already know this guy is going to be at least a little strange. He has some good attributes, most notably the fact that he does love and care for his family and seems pretty welcoming to most people in general. What keeps him from being ranked any higher is his tendency to abuse his power to intimidate others. We saw this from his very first appearance when he said, "I love making him jump," after startling Marshall with his police siren. But it's even more prevalent in the aforementioned Startell Light episode, where I genuinely thought this man was about to push Capano off the roof into an AC fan. Still, it's not always a power trip. He did use his influence to strong-arm Marshall into giving Tommy a mushroom to heal his infection. He's not a bad guy and is even helpful in the Blue Angel growing operation, but he's willing to at least make you think twice before crossing him. He may be a half-brother, but Zane is a real piece of work, honestly. Almost always drugged out of his mind, his hobbies include blasting metal music, doing drugs, and trying to guilt Marshall into letting him take care of his turtle. We'll award him the Envy Sinner Medal for that.
He needs the proper care of a responsible expert.
And actually, the Gluttony Sinner Medal is in order for the aforementioned drug habit. And he also has some more unsavory traits. For one thing, he's pretty self-centered, only willing to help Marshall if he's compensated, even in urgent situations. Then he's also a coward, immediately giving away any information he has the moment pressure is placed on him. And he's also specifically prejudiced against tortoises from Madagascar, which has to be the most weirdly specific flavor of racism that we've ever heard of. But next up is the legendary Huang, Marshall's cellmate during his stay in prison.
Just chill, man. Relax.
Assault and battery is a bad crime to commit, but he doesn't seem too bad as far as that goes. He was pretty friendly to Marshall from the beginning, and he desperately called for help and seemed genuinely concerned when Marshall died. He also has a sense of honor since he called Frances to let her know after the fact. And just narrowly missing out on the bad section is Rusty. Jimmer's nephew takes after him quite a bit. He has all of his uncle's bark with an extra dose of selfishness and naivete. On top of him being the one to charge customers for the Blue Angel, even selling it to those who just want to get high, he threatened Francis to give him some of the mushrooms, and ran off as soon as Capano and Harrington showed up. He'd probably be way more dangerous if he weren't also pretty easy to fool, which earns him the Darwin Sinner Medal. And while it was brave of him to try and hold off the FBI raid, he was a little too excited about gunning people down, which led to his own tragic death. As impulsive and selfish as he was, he at least seemed to be friendly enough for the most part, and wouldn't maliciously hurt anyone who hadn't crossed him. And he did die protecting his friends and family's operation, which earns him a couple last-minute hero points. And with that said, that brings us to the bad and evil characters. And for the lesser of these evils, we have Hilby. She may be the least evil of this bunch, but don't let that fool you. On her first meeting with Marshall in the show, she would have straight up killed him for possession of the mushroom if he hadn't removed bullets from her gun. She's not just crazy though, she's also calculating, and was fully willing to murder Marshall in cold blood so she would have more authority over the mushroom. In a sense, she is trying to do good by getting the Blue Angel to more people, but the fact that she's willing to murder a student, one she knew for years, to do so reveals that she's too unstable for her own good. She also adds water contamination to her criminal record by pouring the Blue Angel tincture into the town's water supply, presumably in an effort to get everyone hooked on the stuff. Her motives are a bit of a mystery, but she's definitely bad news any way you slice it. The same goes for two of the smaller scale bad guys, Lewis and Pete Mulvaney. When Marshall is on the run from the DEA, his friend hooks him up with these two, who are more than happy to burn any evidence of his research. Unfortunately, Lewis has a pattern of arson, resulting in him not just burning down Marshall's house, but getting arrested for an entirely different arson later on. Kinda got the bug. He also refused to help Marshall by pleading guilty, even though it was his fault he got jailed in the first place, showing that he's both dangerous and selfish. Then there's the prison assassin. This guy is one of the most dangerous one-time villains in the show so far. He's one of the many criminals Jonas Backstein has connections with, and gets hired when Marshall's arrested to try and kill him. Any guy who's willing to calmly rob a gas station at gunpoint just to calmly kill a man in prison is a whole new level of dangerous evil. Now, just barely missing out on our podium of evil is another one-off villain, Connor. After seeing Marshall use the Blue Angel to heal a dying child, he made the perfectly logical decision to try and kill him in a plane crash. He still considered selling them even after the fact, which shows that he's both an attempted murderer and a total hypocrite. And Christopher is the last of the secondary villains today, and he's taking our bronze medal of evil. The Jail King rules his prison with an iron fist. Sure, he saved Marshall's life from the assassination, but it's only because Marshall had the potential to be useful to him as a doctor. He openly threatened to murder Marshall if he didn't work for him, but in his very, very limited defense, he did use Marshall's skills to try and heal his buddy's foot. Granted, that's probably just because he was valuable as a bodyguard, but it's still a pretty nice deed regardless. Next, the silver medal of evil goes to Cecily. Cecily is cold, ruthless, and straight to the point. She's a woman who takes matters into her own hands and won't hesitate to undermine the work of others if she thinks she can handle things more efficiently. On its own, that wouldn't be too bad. But the fact is that Cecily is in league with Ryudikal's board of directors, who are determined to get the Blue Angel and anybody selling it wiped out.
You're handling Ryudikal?
Loose ends will be tied.
She was also willing to threaten Francis when she refused to work with her, which implies that she's probably even more dangerous than she lets on. But for now, we have to give the gold medal of evil to the season's main villain. But first, this video is brought to you by Wicked Binge channel memberships. You can gain access to our videos early before anyone else, plus get members-only emojis and loyalty badges by supporting the channel through a membership. And while he isn't purely evil, Jonas Backstein is still the biggest threat we've seen in the show by a long shot. Whereas Rick is somewhat ignorant, but overall well-meaning, his higher-up is a straight-up mastermind. He might act cordially to your face, but this guy isn't nicknamed the Wolf for nothing. When he gets the news that Marshall is dead, he comments on how barbaric the US prison system can be, all while enjoying a celebratory slice of chocolate cake. Let's not forget his reaction to figuring out that Connor had considered selling the Blue Angel, straight up having his associate murder him and throw him out of a car, which is both murder and highway littering. All of that is enough to secure him a top-tier evilness spot, but there is a case to be made that he deserves some sympathy for his lung disease and his admittedly reasonable fear that the Blue Angel's distribution could potentially throw the world into chaos. But his method of enforcing these beliefs are so barbaric that he still comes across as a pretty cut and dry villain. Even so, we can't help but hope that he survived that Blue Angel overdose. Jonas is evil, for sure, but we think this wolf has just enough capacity for redemption, if he so chooses.